Hey there, today I'm testing the i7-3770 non-K in Call of Duty Warzone 2.0. I am pairing this with 32GB of DDR3 1600MHz RAM and a RTX 3060 with the latest drivers. For more information, you can see everything in CPU-Z and GPU-Z, and the game is installed on an SSD. Without further ado, let's get gaming. Starting off, I am at 1080p on the minimum preset, and I went over and disabled on-demand texture streaming. The reason why is I was watching a video from ZWorms Gaming, and they said that that setting did cause some lag spikes. So I disabled it for now, and I will re-enable it later to see if I can see any difference on this computer. 1080p on the low settings, I was actually really underwhelmed with the performance. Don't get me wrong, for me it is perfectly playable. But with this being a 4-core, 8-thread CPU, and an i7, granted it is over a decade old, it's getting beat by a Pentium G7400 with no problems. Like, this is getting 53 frames per second on average, and the Pentium I tested last time got 67 frames per second on average. Granted, the Pentium does have faster single-core performance, but I am actually quite surprised with how slow it did run. Though it didn't stutter that much, to be fair. I noticed a few stutters here and there, but nothing huge or nothing major. Just, I guess the game stutters occasionally, so it's not a big deal. Now, it did often drop into the 40s in the frame rate, and occasionally it actually would drop into the upper 30s, but that would be rare. I guess I was expecting more from this because it has 4 cores and 8 threads versus the Pentium only having 2 cores and 4 threads. I don't know, but it definitely isn't the best experience. But that made me wonder, what if I enable DLSS? With DLSS on quality, I wasn't alive that long, but the game felt basically identical and the frame rate was, well, basically identical. Though I did notice the game was a little bit more blurry. But I'm not going to be testing this that long because it runs exactly the same. Next up is 1080p on the Ultra preset. And the game on the Ultra preset was, as well, not really performing that well. Yes, I didn't have DLSS enabled, but it wouldn't really matter anyway because the graphics card is not near maxed out. The DLSS only really affects the graphics card if it's fully maxed out. If it's not, the game will run basically the same. But with the Ultra settings, the game was running a little bit slower. Instead of getting about 53 frames per second on average, it was getting about 48 frames per second on average. So about 3 to 4 frames per second on average less. But the game did look significantly better. And since the game goes and doesn't run that good in the first place on this CPU, I think I would just opt for the Ultra settings if you have a decent graphics card, because you aren't going to have a competitive experience either way, so you might as well have the game look good rather than look like a turd. Then I decided to enable on-demand texture streaming, and the game ran about the same. I did notice a few stutters here and there, but nothing major. And the game was getting a little bit better frame rate. It was getting about 54 frames per second on average. Though I think it might be due to where I dropped out of the airplane, because when I dropped out of the airplane, I went basically to the far back corner of the map, so not really much was around there. But 54 frames per second on Ultra settings, I think is pretty decent. Also, that is without DLSS. Then I decided to try DLSS Ultra Quality with on-demand texture streaming enabled, and it ran about the same, maybe slightly better. It was getting roughly 56 frames per second on average. And I didn't notice all that much stuttering. It was about the same as before. Now, I didn't go and get into any epic crazy fights or go into the most intensive areas in the entire game, like the city. The reason why is because I will get wrecked immediately. and we won't have any good gameplay. As soon as I walk across any player, I have about a 0.1% chance of actually getting them down. I say that because in the 9 hours I have played this game, I have successfully killed 0 players. Yes, 0. But that's fine. I think the game will run pretty nice pretty much anywhere you are. Just don't try to play it competitively. But either way, do I recommend you to go and download Call of Duty Warzone 2.0 on a i7-3770? Well, if you are using a decent graphics card, I would say go right ahead. It's free, and you might as well. You'll probably have a nice time. Either way, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.